Welcome to History on Drugs. This is our first episode kicking off season 2, and this is going to be a good one. It's going to be a long one. And one of the things I'm going to do differently in this new season is I'm going to go a little deeper in the history after we discuss the impact that drugs had historically on the event or time period. So, and I'm going to do this because even though we have several thousand listeners, not a huge number, but I thought it'd be like 30. But I've had a couple of emails and then people I know in life that listen to it, that I talk to, is that just go deeper in the history. So I'm not a historian at all. And if you only want to listen to the drug stuff because you're somebody that tunes in for that, then just turn it off. So I'm going to do my best to take a deep dive. Also, it's allergy season here in New England, so my eyes are burning, my throat is going, so I might have to stop for some water throughout this show. So, John F. Kennedy. Who killed JFK? Big question. Lots of conspiracy theories around this, and if you're a deep diver on the topic, maybe you walk away learning something today. But if it's just something that you hear topically, or you have some of your own ideas, or you're just curious about it, this is going to be a good episode. And newsflash, like, spoiler alert, I don't know who killed JFK. But what I'm going to try to prove at the end of this episode, that it probably wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald. And we're going to talk about that on the backside. So who is JFK? So JFK comes from a very wealthy family. And if you think of the 19th century America, like the Gilded Age with like the Vanderbilts and the Astors and the Rockefellers, right? Some famous family members went down with the Titanic, if that's the only way you know those names. But they basically ran a big percentage of America in industry and like just pushed capitalism and just started like families accumulating generational wealth and keeping it. So the Kennedys, not quite that big, but they were a huge family. And JFK was one of 9 kids. He had one older brother, and his older brother was actually supposed to be the family hero and who picked up the torch from their father, Joe, and then would be a politician, perhaps a president, a great leader, and everything was kind of filtered around Joe. So that's a lot of pressure on the other 8 Kennedy children. And so when Joe died tragically, JFK was the Kennedy that was going to step up and hopefully achieve great things. So for this episode, I have notes. If you could see my desk, it would definitely represent my hypermanic side. So I'm going to glance down at him a little bit. There's a lot of details on this stuff. So he was 43 years old when he got elected, youngest president elected in the United States. He's a Catholic. Up until this point, the United States never had a Catholic as a president. And that kind of pissed a lot of people off. A lot of people didn't like JFK just for that fact, because they thought he would have to answer to the Pope. Imagine that. And I'm not even sure he was quite that religious, besides doing what you have to do as a politician to show your faith-based approach to shaking hands and kissing babies. So JFK, as a child, was very sick. Like, he was fragile. He had severe pain. They weren't sure what he had. He was always at the doctor, going through a lot of tests. And he ends up having something called Addison's disease. And then he's got some testosterone issues and some hormone issues and a weak immune system. So he's pumped with medications and then pain management early on in his life. So as he gets older, this pain would increase. He goes to college at Princeton, and while he's at Princeton, he hurts himself pretty badly, and he's going to doctors, and he had to drop out of school. And he wasn't even a good student. He wasn't a good student in high school, it turns out, and he wasn't a good student in college, but he loved to have fun. But he had to come home from Princeton. So just because all his medical stuff was interfering, right? And so as a little kid, he was like that kid that was like, "Oh, mommy, can I go outside and play baseball with the boys and girls?" "No, you can't, JFK." It kind of sucked for him. So what would ensue was a regimen of pain management. And this is where the foundation of JFK's substance use history will begin. Um, so he goes to Harvard. He's actually injured there as well, I think playing football or something. So he tried to stay active, even though he shouldn't have. There were times where he reported that he couldn't pull up his socks or even tie his shoes. But one thing he wanted to do right around that time was he wanted to enter the war. World War II was happening. And like many young men of Kennedy's generation, he wanted to go. He had no fear of it. He felt like he had a calling for it. But because of his medical ailments, he was denied entrance into the Navy. So the Kennedys weren't going to accept that. His dad, very prominent man in society, through power, influence, he was able to get JFK into the Navy a second time, and this would send him to the Pacific Theater to battle in World War II. So Joe Kennedy, the big papa of them all, is our first like substance use connection of the Kennedys, because he was a pretty wealthy guy, successful, hardworking, had a lot of he had one foot in Hollywood, and like through his motivation to do like shipping and just like merchant trading, he saw an opportunity when Prohibition in the United States happened, and that's the time America outlawed alcohol for like 13 years. So what Joe Kennedy did is he used his money to invest and to build relationships with the mob, Chicago, New York, LA, all over the country. So he started building these solid relationships with the mob, and he became a smuggler of alcohol during Prohibition and made millions and millions of dollars, and just really stacked up the wealth of the Kennedy family for the future. In fact, I think to this day, when Prohibition ended, the liquor trade they were in, they're still getting money in perpetuity, like forever. It goes to the Kennedy family for a certain type of liquor. I'm not sure which one it is, but I know it still drives their wealth today. So being part of Prohibition and substances like alcohol helped build up the Kennedy wealth, and that's kind of ironic for the discussion we're having. So here, now we're going to go back to the Pacific Theater, World War II. JFK's there. He's still in pain. So he's taking a regimen of pain meds, but he's also taking amphetamines, right? Which would be, today you'd be treated like with Adderall for like ADHD, but it was also used to treat people with depression. And when you take a lot of meds, your dopamine levels in your brain goes up, it goes down. You have good days, you have bad days. So you're going to develop a little bit of anxiety and some depression that may or may not have been there prior. So to combat this, he was taking amphetamines and benzodiazepines, right, which are downers. So those two right there are like the rich man's speedball, right? You got an upper and a downer, and because they're both central nervous depressants, it's a kind of a dangerous combo. Today, you gotta be very careful prescribing those two, and then opiates, right? That's another central nervous system depressant. So in Japan, because of the regimen of pills he's on, which will also include Demerol, which is a powerful opioid, super powerful. In fact, it's so powerful they give it to people or women in pregnancy, right? That's how powerful Demerol is. So he's taking that, and he's also using something called methadone. And methadone is an opioid that's 100 times stronger than morphine. And methadone is used today primarily as pain management, but for people trying to get off heroin, which is an opioid. So you're using an opioid to get off another opioid. And I can just draw a little picture of methadone. So a good portion of my career, I worked in substance use counseling and case management, and I had a lot of clients that were on methadone, and they're on pretty high doses of methadone. So you couldn't really tell the difference if they had shot up heroin or they just went to the clinic to get their methadone. That's how powerful it was. So some of them would just take too much of a medical dose and they just nod off. It's like they want to be high, and they're high, and they're going through life high. So that concept of taking methadone to get off an opioid or an opiate is just, I personally, and you know what, I'm not a clinician or a doctor, it doesn't make sense to me because it's so powerful. So I think it's one of those things where medical professionals learn in a textbook and it sounds good, but the real life application, if you see it and feel it like I was in the community, it's like, no, methadone is not the answer for anything. But where it's safe is, hey, if you have federal or state insurance, you can get it prescribed. It doesn't cost you any money. So that beats going to buy bags of heroin that you might not know what's in it and then using a dirty needle and overdosing or getting a high dose of fentanyl in your heroin. And maybe catching hepatitis from a dirty needle. So the benefit of methadone is you can use a powerful opioid in a controlled environment without the risks of going to the street. But it's still bad, and it does horrible things to your body and your mind. So JFK, he's on methadone, Demerol, benzos, and amphetamines. And like he's taken a lot of them. His medical records were released in 2002. Now you don't see a lot of the juvenile records, but you can see like he was a doctor shopper. He would go to multiple doctors to try to get similar drugs. And like that's what people that are pill seeking and they have an addiction, that's what they do. Right? Today we have technology and a system and a computer, so you can't go to one doctor to get an opioid and then to another one. It's like, system shuts you out, no more. But he was loaded up on that. And why it's important? Because some people say in World War II, where he will be a hero because he will save a life and his own, but his vessel was rammed by a Japanese ship and it cut it in half, blew it up, and everybody died. Everybody died. And this is where the substances first kick in for Kennedy because of the amount he was using. It's believed that actually it was his poor judgment that may have led to this interaction, right? This fatal interaction, because he could have maneuvered differently. He could have organized the patrolmen to look out and to guard and made different military moves, which he did not. So it was a fatal incident. So what happens is he's in the water. He grabs another man. He takes a life vest, the rope through his mouth. He's got the life vest and the other guy, and he swims for like 5-6 hours. They say like almost 3 miles from a few islands in the Pacific to another island looking for resources to save this man's life. And of course his own. So he is recognized for that. But at the same time, it's also underscored and acknowledged that, there could have been some poor judgment involved because of the impulsivity and just the inability to control thoughts and not necessarily paranoia, but just you're not clear-headed when you're high on these opioids, amphetamines, and benzos that we're describing. So he goes and gets some reprieve. He's resting, and here's a rich guy that comes from a rich family that could have went home. And this is where I respect Kennedy a lot, and I think it's well-deserved. He didn't want to go home, and just with his medical issues, he could go. Plus, he was injured, but he wanted to go back and fight, and he did. And we should applaud him for that. That is pretty remarkable, I think. But that mission and being on that boat would only further damage his back, which would only increase the amount of pain management he would need. So there's some things we'll never know, but we have factual information on how he handled medication. So if he's doing it for these, it's likely he's doing it for those. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So he's a senator. And what happens is he's still got to use crutches because he's still in so much pain. He's got a very strong metal back brace that ultimately might have contributed to his death, which we'll get to when we are on the backside of this episode. So he's still struggling, and he didn't want that look when he decides to run for president, right? It just wasn't a good look to be on crutches. Now, we had two presidents before him. I think he had polio was FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He was in a wheelchair, and he was in crutches, and whenever he had to go give a speech, and there wasn't as much TV and camera technology as there was for Kennedy, which is nothing like today, but still there, they would kind of hide him getting out of the car and all the help he needed. So he just kind of wallow up to where he was giving a speech, and that was it. Kennedy didn't want that. He was a good looking guy. And when he was properly medicated, he was fun and exciting. And people liked to be around him. And he was a pretty smart guy. So the substances only kind of bolstered a false sense of his personality, but it worked because it created a charisma that would be very appealing for many people. But for the same reasons, a lot of people didn't like him. They didn't want a young 40-year-old Catholic guy from Boston era with a park the car at Harvard Yard accent. He talked different. He looked different. He was from a different generation. Um, so he goes to run for president. And when he does, he's running against Richard Nixon, right? The man famous for the Watergate break-in, which ironically, there would be another Nixon campaign break-in during him running against JFK. I never knew this until I was doing some research. And this is pretty fascinating. So Nixon got wind that he was kind of like sickly, that he had some immune issues and the crutches, and that he was like sometimes out of it a little bit because of the substances. So they wanted to expose that to the American people, which you can't blame them. You're running against him. Like, let's show his weaknesses. Let's make him look weak. I mean, you got to be strong to be the president, right? And Nixon was just another old white guy in a long line of old white men running the United States, and we can't seem to break it. We did it with Kennedy, and we did it with Obama, right? But other than that, it's maybe Bill Clinton a little bit. It's been old white men. And that's just the way it is. You got to be a little narcissistic to run for president, right? Because you have to believe you have all the answers and the power, and that you're better than everybody else. And you got to be a little bit nuts, right? Because it's a lot. It takes a lot of self-entitlement to run for president. And Kennedy certainly had it, but he had these medical weaknesses. So the substances were helping him out. So when he's running, we find out he's also a womanizer. He also cheated on his wife, Jackie, and their family. Kennedy is like factually known for having so many affairs that everybody kind of knew about it. And one of them was Marilyn Monroe, who was like this hot, famous actress at the time, where she was like the Paris Hilton of the early 1960s, or like a Taylor Swift, just an icon, right? And there's a video of her singing "Happy Birthday, Mr. President," giving him F-me eyes in front of his wife. And Kennedy's getting hotels and having sex with her, and she's known to be a pill popper and abuser. Kennedy loved to drink and have a good time. So through this relationship with people from Hollywood and Marilyn Monroe, he gets introduced to Dr. Max Jacobson. And this would be the game changer for the Kennedy we see in debates and in speeches, and where a lot of America loved him and elected him president. Max Jacobson was known for one thing. He was a European import doctor after World War II, and he was doing stuff like Hitler's doctor was doing. If you go back to season 1, we have an episode called Nazis on Drugs, and Dr. Theodore Morell was Hitler's private doctor. He would shoot Hitler up every day with a concoction that had cocaine, opioids, crazy, right? This is crazy. And then all kinds of like animal glands and weird, like just weird shit from animals that you're like, what? Because they didn't have the same rules we have today. Eventually, Max Jacobson would lose his license for doing this batshit crazy stuff. I think he even had some like bat stuff in there too. So this guy got famous with Hollywood. He started on Broadway, and Max Jacobson, like Hitler's Dr. Moreau, he created a shot that included all these animal glands and other things that we honestly don't give a shit about because they're not that exciting. They're just things that make you cringe. But his shot was methamphetamine based. Crystal meth. This doctor is shooting his clients, famous Hollywood people, with a shot of crystal meth. And why? To give them energy and to get them speeded up and excited and to, go do their acting and go out in front of crowds and people and shake hands and make everybody laugh and be boisterous, and they're high as fuck, right? That's crystal meth. It's not just like a little dose of it. So Kennedy gets in on that shit. He gets in on that shit. So now if you go back and watch the debates with Nixon, one of the reasons a lot of people say Nixon lost, he just looked like a tired old man next to this like boisterous Kennedy who was high on crystal meth. Not to mention, why we're covering him on History on Drugs, he was using a high regimen of opioids and benzos and barbiturates. And yeah, sure, he had tons of medical issues. He had, let me just get it right. I got to find the list. Yeah, he had colitis. He had bad immune system. He had Addison's disease. He had some bone issues, gastrointestinal issues, depression. And then because he was a ladies' man, he loved the women. He did from a young age in college. That's what he was known for. He had syphilis. The 35th president of the United States had a big STD, syphilis. He had the drip. And he's going around having like affairs with Hollywood celebrities. And was he spreading syphilis? I don't know. I didn't even know that. Isn't that nuts? So Kennedy's got syphilis. Yeah. So I find that to be hilarious. But anyways, now he's on crystal meth, all of these other drugs. He's rolling through the campaign, but it's still not enough, right? Like America's a little more conservative back then. And Kennedy like needed some help to get elected. So he was going to need the state of West Virginia and Illinois to push him over the electoral college vote amount to win. And we didn't know if he was going to do it. So Joe Kennedy, the dad, who built all these mob relationships during Prohibition when he was illegally smuggling booze, he tapped his mob friends and was like, hey, we got to get my kid elected. So in West Virginia, the mob boots on the ground, we don't know what they did. Kennedy won West Virginia, like just got it out. And then in Illinois, he squeaks by, and a lot of the reports are the mob. We don't know if they mess with the ballots. There are some rumors. I can't like verify or corroborate that. I didn't find like the specific smoking gun on that, which is an ironic term talking about Kennedy because there's like a lot of conspiracy theories. But this one's not a conspiracy theory. They're intimidating voters too, right at the ballot box. So with the help of the mob, Kennedy wins by only a couple 100,000 votes, one of the closest elections ever at the time. And he becomes the president. But during that campaign, because of Nixon's hunch and trying to demonstrate him as sickly and not fit to be the president, we can't pin this one on Nixon, but a cow is a cow is a cow, right? Like it looks familiar. And what I mean is JFK's, two of his doctor's offices were broken into during the campaign. They didn't touch anything. They didn't steal anything. They rummaged through the files. Obviously, it was orchestrated and people were pinning it on Nixon. And maybe Nixon didn't know. It could have been a campaign manager. But hey, Nixon orchestrated Watergate, and it was the same thing, breaking into the Democratic National Convention building, the Watergate Hotel, right, to get in on their files to see what was happening, tapping their phones. So what they didn't plan for is JFK didn't use his real name at his doctor, so they didn't know who the file was. So it didn't work out. So he's elected. Nixon he'll go off into the sunset for now. JFK appoints Lyndon B. Johnson to be his vice president. So now we have a president elected. Okay. And then some people will say, and if you look in like the National Archives, it's just facts. Like there's a lot of stuff on Kennedy documents not being released and some that were released, like his medical records. I lost my train of thought. Like I just had a total brain fart. Oh, so Dr. Jacobson. So some people are like, no, this is bullshit. Kennedy wasn't taking meth. He was a man of principle. All that. No, he wasn't. He was having affairs, and not just with like Marilyn Monroe. He was having an affair with, I think it's Sam Giancana, the Chicago mob boss, his girlfriend. Like they were sleeping with the same girl. He was sleeping with girls when he went to Europe. He had a friend, Mary something. You don't care about her last name. After this podcast, you're not going to remember it. We'll call her Mary because that's her name. She'd known Kennedy as a kid. They were having an affair. She'd visit the White House. She's in White House logs. They used to stay at the Eisenhower or the Roosevelt, one of the hotels in New York City. He had a suite, and he would just shack up there with her for days. And this is fact. Like reporters would see it, and everybody knew it, and they would never like write about it. Like eventually they'll start writing about a high-profile government officials having affairs and potentially compromising state secrets. But with Mary, she smoked pot with him all the time. He was the president of the United States. And then she reports, and people close to her, that they did LSD together. like LSD, a president that did LSD. Now this one, like I can't quite put the stamp on it, but when the LSD in the early 1960s was getting out through the government, and was it Tim Leary, right? She was able to have the context, say, listen, I need it. I need it to be good. I need to be clean. Tell me what to do. I have a very high profile government official I'm going to do it with, so I want it to be done right. And that, you can find that is corroborated. So who was that? She was staying with Kennedy at the White House and hotels. It had to be him. And then some people analyze the way he approached his speech and his policies and his agenda after his trip. And that's why he was for peace. And he was a peaceful president who's motivated by peace. And we're going to talk about that a lot. So we got LSD, marijuana, crystal meth, injection, well on, opioids, barbiturates, benzos. Okay, you don't need the amphetamine because crystal meth is going to blow away the little Adderall he was taking. However, that's not it. He liked to go to Las Vegas and hang out with some of the mob guys, like a little hand distance between them, but he liked to hang out with the Rat Pack, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr. He would drink liquor and the women, and it's just nuts. It's the president of the United States. You couldn't get away with any of this today, obviously, because everybody's got cameras and social media. But for some reason, like America let their presidents have affairs and they still only judge them by like what they saw on TV, because even right before that, FDR, he had an affair for tons of years. His wife even had an affair with another woman. But because of media, it just wasn't moving like it does today. It just didn't become prominent. So maybe everybody didn't know it, or like, we don't believe it. Look at him. He's such a cute little Irish guy from Massachusetts. So other verified use of substances is there's recordings, right, that were released. You can listen to White House phone calls that don't have like state secrets and things you shouldn't hear, but like asking for reports or towels or whatever it is. You can hear JFK. You can find this on Google. You can go on YouTube. And he's like, he calls down to the White House doctor. He's like, it's JFK. He doesn't say JFK. And they're like, how can I help you, Mr. President? He's like, yeah, could you send up a couple of those little blue pills? Jackie seems to need a few more of them. What? Blue pills? Those are barbiturates. Mother's Little Helper, the Blue Bombers. So Jackie O's popping the barbiturates, and you can't blame her. Her husband's running around having sex with famous people, and like it's kind of a real dark side to the Kennedys that we don't talk about or hear about, or there's like it's at an arm's length because there's got to be some sort of respect for it. I call bullshit. The guy was cheating on his wife, abusing substances, and like call him out on it. And listen, there's bad people that do good things, right? Not everybody's perfect. I'm not a perfect human being. I made so many bad mistakes in my life. Poor judgment, just stupid shit. But I just love to help people. And I'm a like fundamentally moral, good person that's imperfect. And so Kennedy was too. So we can judge the good with the bad as we look back through history. But it's pretty remarkable. And another thing, his Secret Service group didn't die when he died, right? So when they became old men and they would do interviews, they talked a little more openly about their former boss, JFK, and these Secret Service, like, yeah, he did a lot of stuff that was unbecoming of a president of the United States. And you can see the emotion of some of these Secret Service guys. Like, I didn't know what to do. Like, we know he's in a hotel room and like we're in Europe and there's rumors that the woman he's with could be tied to Russia, like a KGB asset. And now we're at the height of the Cold War in America in the 50s and 60s, where people were just getting accused of being communists, right? Khrushchev led Russia. Kennedy, there was nuclear standoffs. Like there's a lot of tension we're going to talk about a little bit. But Kennedy could have been laying around just telling state secrets. Who knows? So that pissed a lot of people off. And it pissed off the deep state and the military industrial complex and Hoover at the FBI. Also, one of the Secret Service guys shared that he remembers a time where the helicopter came in and it was early. And he's like, oh shit, Jackie O's coming home. Well, what's JFK doing? He is skinny dipping in the White House pool at the time with two secretaries. They called him Fiddle and Faddle. It's the 1960. Like you can't blame him for the nicknames, right? He's skinny dipping with two secretaries. And the Secret Service guy, I forget his name, comes up and tells us, like, we got to go. He's like, all right, let's clear this out. And Kennedy hands him a Bloody Mary. Like, do something with this. Like, nuts. Like, this is truly 60 years ago, right? The election was in 1960. He would be in power for less than 3 years, like 2.5 years before he's ultimately killed. And in that time, through this behavior, he pisses some people off, right? It's not just because he was a womanizer, but nobody liked Dr. Feelgood. Dr. Feelgood was in the White House logs. Sorry, that's Max Jacobson. I should have said that. The Secret Service nicknamed him Dr. Feelgood. And people try to say, oh, it didn't happen. Dr. Jacobson, I want to call him Mr. Feelgood. Dr. Feelgood, he's in the White House logs. You can see the records. They're in the National Archives. He's visited 34 times in that short 2.5-year period to see Kennedy. And Jackie O, she was also taking the shot. So Jackie O's taking the shots, popping the barbiturates, and who knows what her other regimen was. And then there's rumors. I haven't done this research to corroborate it, but you see it pop up a little bit. She was having her own affairs. So I don't know if they had an open marriage, but it's just wild to think of all the substances going on and partying and hanging loose. Meanwhile, we're in the Cold War with Russia. Vietnam is happening, right? There's a civil rights crisis and segregation issues right here in America, and the president's like having a good old time. So J. Edgar Hoover, an old guard, like just another old military industrial complex white male, like you got to do it the old way or no. They didn't like Kennedy. And he didn't like Kennedy for a lot of reasons: the womanizing, maybe compromising state secrets, his judgment and sound mind because of the way he behaved, and some of his policy stuff. But because Kennedy appointed his little brother, Bobby Kennedy, to be the Attorney General. And when Bobby Kennedy became Attorney General, he says to Hoover, you don't go to my brother anymore. You go through me. And that pissed Hoover off. So Hoover started collecting a file on Kennedy. It was all the women he was sleeping with and how he was behaving. And then there was like some newspaper articles that I mentioned earlier. They're like a high profile government officials having affairs, maybe compromising state secrets and having a good time. And like, but the reporter knew it was Kennedy. They didn't mention him. And I don't know what kind of like, was there like a respect? You can't do that today. It'd be like headline, Joe Biden having an affair, Donald Trump having an affair. Like people would love it. It's sensationalism, clickbait, right? So for some reason they protected him, but Hoover was going to blow the cover. He's like, this has to stop. We've got to rein him in. It's dangerous, right? Hoover didn't like a Catholic. He didn't like the womanizing. He didn't like the way he would build relationships with Russia, Cuba, Vietnam. And then he thought his judgment was compromised. So Kennedy pissed a lot of people off. All right. So there's just so many moving parts to this. I'm trying to give a good basis of the drugs. And at this point, this is where we're at with Kennedy. And they say it wasn't until about 1962 where Bobby Kennedy was like, we got to get rid of this Dr. Feelgood. Like he took samples of what he was getting shot at, sent it out to a lab, and JFK's like, I don't care if it's horse piss. It makes me feel great and I can do the job, right? I don't need my crutches and I can walk around. And so Bobby didn't like it. Secret Service didn't like it. And they say by the year he got assassinated that he was actually the healthiest he ever was. Well, people always say that. Like, oh, he really had it. He really had it going this time.